moving with our scientific session. This is a lecture series, and for the first lecture series, the topic is innovations without access is not really an innovation, for which our speaker would be Dr. Madhukar Pai, Professor McGill University, Canada, and the moderator for this session would be Dr. Ranjani Ramachandran, NPO Laboratory Services, WHO India. I would request both of you to please. Over to you, Dr. Ranjani.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Welcome back after a nice lunch. I hope you're all not going to be sleeping. Of course, Madhu will not allow you to sleep. So, but yeah. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Madhukar Pai. Of course, many of you know him as Madhu, and he's not very unfamiliar with India, and he's been coming very often. And of course, he's been my dear friend for a very long time. We come from the same college. Then, of course, both of us speak Tamil. But to say a lot, he has been really working and pioneering in the field of diagnostics. He's been one person who has been very passionate about pushing for technology transfer to the South. You would have heard his ardent plea in the previous session where he talked about how things are not really coming to the global South and why the global South needs more of this. And I think I'll allow him to really talk about this, and maybe you have some questions for him, and then we can have a good discussion. Over to you, Madhu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ranjani. Can we have the slides, please? Thanks, everyone. Great to see the big turnout. So I wanted to kind of pose the question, is innovation without access real an innovation? I think I'll immediately answer it so that this is not a suspense for anyone. I genuinely don't believe. I don't care much these days for what's called innovation when it hardly reaches those who really need it the most. And I realize that I've been writing about this for many years now. 10 years ago, I wrote that piece with Jen Furin. TB innovations mean little if they cannot save lives. And then more recently, last year, we wrote this piece, Science Should Save All, Not Just Some. And I think it basically captures the philosophy of, excellence without equity really doesn't mean much in the global health context. I'm not sure about other areas, but within global health, where we deal with so many people who are suffering from poverty and other issues, we really cannot not think about equity. So this is a beautiful staircase. If you go to the WHO UNAIDS office, UNAIDS building, you will see this. Each step is a human right. And you can see the first step is right to health, which we all agree. Health is a human right. There's also the next step, and it says the right to enjoy the benefits of science. And that's a second right, which we don't talk much about, right? If science has produced something brilliant, but if it's locked away to people who need it the most, that's a violation of the right. And so if we all believe health is a human right, then access to medicines, vaccines, drugs are subsumed under that human right. You can't say health is a right and then lock up medicines. It makes absolutely no sense. And yet, millions of people are struggling to access insulin or GLP analogs or COVID vaccines or HIV medicines. And that is the story of global health, that medicines and vaccines should not be seen as a luxury. And so here are some examples of egregious inequities in access to medicines. I think we all agree that the biggest crisis that our generation has ever seen in our lifetime is COVID. Nothing is even on the same scale as what we have suffered during COVID. Right at the start of the time when COVID vaccines became available, we all could see quickly that if we don't vaccinate everyone, this pandemic is going to be devastating, right? I remember writing that article in Science magazine, Vaccinate the World. Don't hold back, because if you hold back and if you leave millions of people unvaccinated, This is going to be an absolute disaster. And that's exactly what ended up happening, right? Vaccine inequity was so bad, as you can see on your left side. Huge numbers of people in the world never even saw one dose of the vaccine, let alone two, let alone boosters. And the differential impact was primarily on low and middle income countries. Low and middle income countries bore the brunt of the 25 million excess deaths that we saw during COVID 19. I think COVID vaccine inequity will go down in history as one of the most dangerous inequities ever. When the dust settles, modeling estimates suggest that half of all COVID deaths globally could have been avoided if everybody had access to at least two doses of a vaccine. HIV, what can we say here, right? When HIV medicines first became available, they were charging $10,000 US per person per year. And hardly anyone could even afford the. How many of you remember easy access to antiretrovirals in India 20 years ago? Right, we couldn't even dream of it, right? And look at the slow pace of access. It took 20 years or so before antiretrovirals became relatively easily accessible in sub-Saharan Africa, by which time millions of people got infected. HIV changed the trajectory of the African continent. Life expectancy dipped. So many people have been left orphaned because of HIV. Much of this drama could have been avoided if antiretrovirals had been made easily available and accessible to people who needed it. Let's turn to TB. 15 years ago, Gene Expert was WHO approved. We all remember that. 2010 WHO policy. I was involved in that policy development. I remember writing a piece in the New England Journal with Peter Small where we called it a game changer, right? 15 years ago. And look at the slow pace of uptake of CBNAT globally. That's the most recent figure as of last year's data. A WHO recommended rapid test was used at the initial diagnostic. Only 1 in 2 people have received it. This is what Dr. Soumya also pointed out this morning. Yes, molecular tests are a spectacular innovation, but it's simply not reaching everyone at this point. Let's look at BPAL and BPAL-M. We would all agree that a 6-month all-oral regimen with no injectables is spectacular. If I had DRTB, this is what I would want for myself. And look at the graph here. That little purple line is the scale-up of the 6-month all-oral regimens. According to WHO, only 3% of people with DRTB are on oral 6-month regimen. 3%. Right? So to me, just having an innovation is simply not working because it's not reaching people who need it the most. So why is access to medicines and vaccines such a big struggle in global health? There is no doubt in my mind that the whole big pharma model is 100% broken. That is a model that only rewards quarterly profits for companies. It has got no access built into it because the market only rewards pharma greed. Second, the intellectual property IP system is completely rigged in favor of big pharma and rich countries who they aggressively lobby. And I will show you examples of this. The trickle-down model is failing. In a big crisis like COVID-19, rich countries hoarded and monopolized vaccines. Public investments are made in technologies with no promise of access to the same medicines or technology. Regional manufacturing and self-sufficiency by global South nations is not getting the support it requires. And the pandemic accord is practically dead right now. And the pandemic accord was designed to prevent vaccine hoarding by rich countries. And yet, big pharma and rich countries have literally killed the pandemic accord as of now. Even the recent negotiations were not successful. And I'm not sure if there will ever be a pandemic accord. So here is an example of big pharma and how deeply problematic their model is. US government gave Moderna more than $10 billion of taxpayer money. American taxpayers literally created Moderna vaccine. If ever there was a vaccine that you would call a people's vaccine, this is it. $10 billion free given to Moderna. And what happened? That company made billions in profit. Their CEO made $400 million per year in salary. $400 million annual salary for the CEO of Moderna. That's the level of profit they made. And they refused to hand over the vaccine technology to South Africa and other countries that asked for it. They said, look, NIH and US government paid for your vaccine. Give us the recipe. In a crisis, we will make it. And we'll make it affordable to African nations. They said no. And this is where we ended up today. As I said in this morning, Moderna and Pfizer now have complete monopoly of the mRNA platform. Nobody else can pull off the mRNA platform without their blessings. And this is a massive problem because this platform is not only for COVID. You can make cancer vaccines. You can work on flu vaccines and a whole bunch of, it's a platform. It's not just designed only for COVID, right? And the American patent system, which dominates the rest of the world, is extraordinarily deeply flawed. What they allow companies to do is when their patent is about to end, they will put another patent, not just one. They will add multiple patents and they'll keep on evergreening it. This is called patent evergreening, right? So as one patent is ending, they'll add another patent. They'll change something tiny and they'll put another patent. Then they'll change something tiny, they'll put another patent. They'll keep on going and therefore they will have the monopoly on that particular product. Here is an example, extraordinarily crazy example. Inhalers, all of us know the salbutamol inhaler or the other inhalers. They could cost $7 in France. The same exact inhaler is out $500 in the United States. And when they looked at it closely, they realized that the inhaler companies were patenting things like a strap that keeps the lid on it and not fall off. Now, I don't know which idiot decided that a plastic strap, is worthy of an intellectual property patent. And this is the reason why they can charge ridiculous amounts for inhalers, for insulin. Now, insulin is a 100-year-old molecule. There is no reason why it should cost hundreds of dollars. Americans are driving across the border to Canada to buy cheaper insulin. Right? This is just complete insanity. There is no rhyme or logic to it. And J&J was about to evergreen bedaquiline in India. And it took Nandita and other TB survivors to challenge J&J and win the lawsuit to prevent them from evergreening the patent in India, right? This is again a great example of how devastating these sorts of monopolies can be. So I wrote this piece at the start of the COVID pandemic, even before I knew what COVID was. And I had said this whole trickle-down model is failing. By that I mean product is developed in Sunnyvale, California, or someplace, and then 20 years later, it becomes easily available in sub-Saharan Africa or rural India. And that's the trickle-down model. COVID vaccines are also trickling down from the rich nations to other parts of the world. And this is a graphic from the Gates Foundation some years ago. It needs to be updated. But you can see products reach scale quickly in high-income countries. Same product can take up to a decade or 2 decades before they start reaching some scale. You just saw 15 years for GeneXpert, right? 20 years for antiretroviral medicines, hepatitis B vaccine, hepatitis C cure, right? When it launched, hepatitis Q, so sofosbuvir, was $80,000 for a 2-week treatment, right? Lenacapavir, Gilead launched it at $42,000 for 2 injections, right? That's why it takes 2 decades before it becomes affordable and accessible, during which time millions of people have died already. And generics, we know, can be manufactured at a fraction of the cost. The same lenacapavir, people have worked out the math, could be made for $40 a year per patient, while the company is asking $42,000. Same Ozempic. Novo Nordisk will sell it for $1,000 for Ozempic, and the same thing can be made for $5 a month if a generic could be manufactured. And lastly, it deeply bothers us and should bother us that black and brown people in Africa or India are seen as worthy of clinical trials, but not worthy of access. Everybody wants to come here to run clinical trials. Lenacapavir was done in Uganda, but Ugandans can't afford lenacapavir, right? It's like our bodies are perfect for as a lab to help vaccine trials or drug trials, but somehow we are not worthy of access. So, how do we change the narrative? I think global south countries, and India is already well past this stage, but the more manufacturing we have in the global south, the better the situation is going to be. Any time when manufacturing is only happening in the rich world, I think we are doomed. We can already tell the story. How? Because if you look at COVID vaccine, whichever country made its own COVID vaccine, they had a better outcome, right? US made it, they did okay, although too many people died in America as well. India manufactured, China manufactured, Cuba manufactured. Any country that made its own COVID vaccine generally managed to scale it up faster, right? Countries that could not manufacture were left waiting. And Africa had no ability to manufacture. Africa was dead last in terms of access, right? So, in terms of strategies to improve access to tools, I have a few suggestions. All public tax dollars. When you give public money to a private company, you have to attach a clause to it and say, if you're taking money from the government, then you have to offer the product at a reasonable price. I'm not saying give it away for free, but there has to be a reasonable pricing agreement attached to public money. Secondly, publicly funded trials should have a plan to access. When the trial is finished, if the medicine is working well, then all the trial participants should receive that medicine at a minimum. Better regulation of big pharma. I think if countries like India have always used price caps to make sure crazy prices are not there, that needs to be like COVID vaccines. We all had a price cap. Pretty much everywhere in the world, COVID vaccines were capped. COVID tests were capped. So when there is a need and an emergency, governments should use price caps smartly, thoughtfully. Increase competition and support for generics. I cannot tell you how big a difference it's making to see Indian-made molecular tests now available as a competition to Cepheid, because that is how Cepheid's monopoly got broken. That's how Cepheid price starts coming down. This needs to happen across the board. We have to overhaul the patent system and prevent companies from continuing to evergreen patent forever. And the global south needs support for increasing and diversifying manufacturing. Thankfully, Asia is a spectacular hotbed of innovations. Look at the innovations in this building. Those of you who came to Bali for the conference, we saw the number of Asian innovations, Chinese innovations, Korean, Japanese. Fantastic products are coming out of Asia. So I'm actually very convinced that Asia is the next big manufacturer of TB tools. In fact, even bedaquiline is manufactured here in India, right? So how can we support global south product developers? Incubators and early stage public sector funding is key. That's what BIRAC and others have successfully done in India. I think all those innovations in this building owes its existence to all of the seed funding and incubators and all of the Bangalore, Silicon Valley ecosystem and all of the churn that has happened in India. It has taken time, but it's finally starting to provide results. Sample bank, protocols and product validation networks. Every time I meet Indian companies, they ask me, we need TB samples. We need protocols. We need biobanks because we need to quickly validate them. So anything we can do to make standardized cough samples, standardized imaging, standardized, well-characterized serum samples, anything you can give to companies, they will gladly take it because they're desperately looking for it. Clear and transparent regulatory process. This is the CDSCO process. Anything that is transparent and clear will do well. We need a smarter adoption pathway for health ministry and TB program. We need to support Indian companies, for example, on accessing the WHO pathway for approval. I think Soumya said that, Gagandeep said that. Can Indian products now start scaling in other parts of the world? Well, for that to happen, they need a global approval. and that requires evidence. Like just the way MolBio went all the way to WHO approval or Cure AI did, we need many more examples. And lastly, all companies will tell you that if we got some kind of a volume guarantee or procurement numbers, then their life is made much easier. Because without knowing how many tests to make, they really struggle. Erratic volumes by procurement is a big deterrent to companies. They want some reliable volumes. And during COVID, they got reliable volumes, right? But afterwards, it's become a very difficult process. So I'll end by showing you that this is something that Gagandeep showed as well. This is the critical path for an indigenous TB test for public sector in India, right? Having clarity on the each step, what's required, how much data is required, how many patients need to be recruited, how long will it take from step A to step B to step C, what will it take before a product is ready to be accepted by CTD. Having clarity on this will be immensely helpful. And if we can shorten this pathway from, say, 2 years to 6 months or 8 months or 9 months, it'll be of great benefit to everyone. I think this is important. Secondly, as Gagandeep was saying, can Indian products access a global market? Well, there are 4 pathways to do that: WHO Class A, WHO Class B, WHO pre-qualification, and the Global Fund ERPD, right? Right now, I can think of TrueNat that has gone through this pathway. I can think of Cure AI that has gone through the pathway. I would love to see many more Indian innovations access the global market, for which evidence needs to be generated, and it needs to go through one of these 4 processes. So I'll just end by saying that there is no question that innovations are coming thick and fast. I mean, just walking around this exhibit hall was a great pleasure to see how much is going on. But I think we've got to go beyond excellence without equity, right? We've got to really solve the access problem. That's how I think we'll finally start seeing TB incidence decline and the benefits that we're looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhu. That was absolutely wonderful and very attractive way of, putting a very difficult topic to look positive. Because actually, the process itself, what he was saying, is very difficult because of barriers that are already existing and even the mind blocks that we have. Because sometimes I feel that we think that whatever product we have developed may not meet the global benchmark. I think we should forget that we are equally good. We meet the global standards, because see, if you don't apply for the global standards, then you don't know whether your product is actually meeting the benchmark. So I think somewhere, the entire process of even how we think about innovation and how we build products needs to change. And I think we need more Madhus to come and speak to us too.
No, it's not me, but look at Indian-made medicines.
Yeah.
I think all of the world relies on Indian
Absolutely.
anti-TB medicines.
Yeah.
All of Africa relies on Indian-made generic ARVs.
Yes.
Right? So it's not just diagnostics or medicines. India has
it's
always been an innovator that way.
No,
right?
till TrueNat came and really became the thing, I think, there was a little bit of thing that maybe, we will not. But I think we've really done good in terms of, because medicines have been, really traditional. And, moving on to health technologies, especially diagnostics and even other tools. And I think that has, including the stents, the cardiac stents, which are,
and the Indian-made rotavirus vaccine.
Yes.
Right? So the whole bunch of Indian-made vaccines that have made it into the global market.
Absolutely. So if there are any specific questions, please. Yes.
It was wonderful hearing you. Wonderful hearing you. Just one quick question. We are going through a very serious problem likely to occur in India. And I'm referring to the practice that we have been following for the last couple of decades of not making the ingredients ourselves. We get it straight from China and make it. And tomorrow, a day will come when China will stop making it. Then we will not be able to make a single antibiotic at all. A great antibiotic plant in Rishikesh, many drug companies are all closed because they don't make the ingredients. So I think that's a serious problem that the government of India, and I think you need to write about this also, this practice has to close.
Yes.
The government of India has to invest in manufacturing ingredients. Otherwise, we'll be in a very, very terrible
I
condition.
completely agree with you. This absolutely needs to be taken up. And I think just as C Camp started manufacturing PCR reagents in India, the APIs have to be made here. And I don't think it's rocket science, really. There's no reason why India can't do it in 2025, right? Beautiful point, sir. Please write an op-ed on it. I think we need to kind of raise more public outrage that this could happen to us, right? Look at America first is already killing so many things. China could do the same thing.
Thanks, Madhu. This was really interesting. So it's not a question, but a comment. So what is really happening is, we see that innovation is happening. We have a lot of diagnostic tests coming in. But the other aspect also is, who are those who are going to encourage these donors, encourage these players to get in. So usually what we had seen traditionally also, it has been the donors, like coming from outside, those who see that there's a gap. And then they put in their catalytic funding and then we do it. But the challenge comes in terms of the terms and condition, which also comes with the donors, right? So and many a times it is right, but many a times you would also want to question that, how much leeway do we give? So when I say like WGPQ, yes, it has to be there. SRA should be there, because that is how you're going to make your product competitive. But then if you reduce the benchmark just to put your product up in, that becomes a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Shami. Valid point.
It was a lovely presentation. So it's a different question. I'm a little curious to know, us being in Global South, India here right now discussing this is a very strong advocacy piece. What is the reaction that you get when you have a similar presentation in the Global North? What are the kind of counter debates, counter arguments that come? Because I'm sure, like, I've seen some of the comments that come in your op-eds and all of this, they're pretty nasty. So I want to know, when you kind of talk in Global North, what is the kind of reactions and comments you get?
Great question. During the peak of the pandemic, I tried so hard to convince the Canadian government to donate vaccines faster, because Canada procured 6 times more vaccine than there are Canadians. And in the end, millions of those vaccines died in the refrigerator. Never saw the light of the day. And I think what I realized, I even was invited to speak to the Canadian Parliament about this. We tried so hard and it simply would not result in a change. And I realized finally why. First of all, pharma people were lobbying aggressively with the Canadian government. They did not want the intellectual property waiver, and that's why Canada never supported it. Okay. Secondly, Canadian politicians thought if they gave vaccines to places far away, that they would lose votes within their constituency. This is the biggest challenge. How do I, if you're not voting for me, and you're far away, donating to you is not helping me get re-elected. The real world politics of how politicians think goes against equity. Even though intellectually everybody said, oh, we are all in this together, this pandemic is impacting the whole world, we have to vaccinate the whole world. They said all of that. But when push came to shove, they only prioritized what they thought they will look good. And giving away a vaccine in the pandemic did not make them look good. They killed it, right? So it's a big hard sell. The piece that I wrote in Science magazine, that science should save all or not some of the biggest, harshest criticism came from scientists. You know what scientists said? This guy is confusing pure science, which is just joy of discovery, with stupid stuff like access. And I'm like, there is no science that exists in a vacuum. All scientists belong in a society, right? They said, don't bother us with access and paralyzing things like that. Just let us be. We want to go study a mouse. Fine. You study a mouse. Nobody's preventing you. But if that mouse is producing something life-saving, how can you not think about it as a scientist, right? Scientists have the serious problem that they think access is a political issue, that it is not a pure science issue. They say, you just let us publish in Nature, we're done. We don't care whether our product is accessible or not, because that's not our headache. Somebody else needs to worry about it, but not us, right? And so I think this is slowly coming to a point where, imagine being a climate scientist in 2025. You're doing great climate science. You know the world is heating up disastrously. At some point, will you not also advocate? Right? I think we've reached a point where it's impossible to be a climate scientist or not also be an advocate. Right? I think this is the kind of criticism I get. You being too activisty. Right? And I'm saying when people are dying in front of you by the millions, if you don't advocate, then when will you advocate? What is the point of being a scientist if you don't stand up for principles, right? And that is where I think we are slowly hitting this. The gap between science and advocacy is a thin one, right? I think we're all advocates at some trash, didn't even make the media. It's that sad, right? How many million people we could have saved if we had pushed out donated faster, supported the intellectual property waiver, had Africa manufacture its own vaccines. We could have transformed the trajectory of the pandemic. Even today, the African continent cannot manufacture vaccines. And it will be a disaster now with the US funding withdrawal. Imagine if Africa region was making its own antiretrovirals. If PEPFAR died, fine. You can still save your people, right? This is the challenge. Diversified manufacturing is absolutely fundamental. Relying on any one country is absolutely disastrous. We've seen it now in the last 8 weeks. Right? Relying on US is an absolutely disastrous proposition at this time and place. Nargish?
How do you see global South cooperation, technical cooperation for transferring these technologies?
I love that India has now licensed some products to Africa region. So the G20 was all about Global South. G20 presidency went from Indonesia to India to South Africa to Brazil. I'm really enjoying seeing the revival of the Global South. And we were just talking over lunch today. In this moment of crisis for Africa, where PEPFAR funding is dropped, can Indian generic pharmaceuticals support them with antiretrovirals for a while to tide over this disastrous situation? That would be a beautiful example of South-South solidarity, right? South-South solidarity is absolutely required at this stage. Otherwise, you can't tackle the global North hegemony.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Meena Puttaraj from TVPVM Learning Network. So attending this conference, India Innovation Summit, I find disturbing that all the innovations, most of the innovations are either about therapeutics or diagnostics. Out of 100, let's say only 10 are talking about social innovations. That too in a very reductionistic manner, where they see community engagement as one social innovation, and then communities are passive recipients of information or care or whatever it is, service delivery. I find this very disturbing. So this is a very nice platform where social innovation should have taken at least 50% of the space, even on the stage. I find it very disturbing. And I also want to put forward an hypothesis here. I feel, having worked in health governance projects, in general, I feel the governance spaces, especially for TV service delivery, is too much medicalized. You know, all the health administration is dominated by medical power. So my hypothesis is that if we dismantle this medical power and give space for a multidisciplinary, or let's say people with multidisciplinary background to occupy this health administration spaces, and then maybe we can address the social determinants of TB, and truly then we understand that TB is a social disease. So what do you think about this in national level and subnational level? How can we demedicalize the TB governance spaces?
Thank you, Meena. I find it very insightful. Firstly, I think the reason why we may have gotten so many gizmos and gadgets is the popular understanding of innovation. Innovation is automatically seen as something in a box, right? Or an app, or something that is purchased and bought and sold, right? So that is how the world sees innovation as, and people don't realize there are many, many ways of innovating, right? As somebody once said, just existing on $1 a day itself is an innovation. Because you and I would probably die right? There are millions of people surviving on $1 a day, and how they are making it, it's itself an innovation, right? Because they're doing things that you and I can't even conceive of, right? We may call it jugaad or whatever it is, but they're surviving. So I think there are Indians who have thoughtfully broadened the framework of what an innovation is, right? Process innovations are everywhere in India, right? That famous example is where we went and recharged our SIM cards, right? The little shops around the corner suddenly became SIM cards, and everybody and the brother could recharge it. That's an innovation, right? We did not have to do crazy things to recharge a phone. And now everything like Paytm or whatever, they're all innovations, right? We don't see it like that because it's not a kit in the box. To go back to your question of social determinants, I think Anurag and Madhavi are not in the room. I think they are truly pioneers in India. Not that we didn't know nutrition was important, right? We've known it for, I think, for days, since Dr. D. Banerjee's days, okay? But yet, they showed us that just rain or shine, somebody comes to your door, delivers $10 worth of food, groceries to you, and can cut TB incidence by half is an innovation, right? It's not a kit in a box. It's not something you can, app to download. But they demonstrated to us that one can act and one can make a big difference in the lives of people, right? So I think they have opened the doors genuinely in India to think about social determinants, because all these years we were paying lip service, right? We all knew it, but we failed to act on it, right? And I think that is the first time I'm seeing the non-medical space open up in India, right? If you want to save people with TB in India, there is a medical way of doing it. In addition, there's a social determinants that you can tackle. Now, I think others are adding more ways of supporting people and coming up with smarter ways of doing it. I'm seeing that India has genuinely changed. WHO is coming up with the new guidelines on nutrition, and Indian evidence has played a massive role in changing it.
So, in a government enterprise, it's a single letter which comes from up, and we share the samples. You understand? So, otherwise, we are discarding those samples. So, I think it is something which has to come as a policy decision if we are actually supporting these innovators. There is no dearth of samples, frankly speaking.
Right. There's no mechanism
but
to
we
give
can't
it out.
give it by ourselves.
I see.
But if the thing comes from up, that's how we send also the samples across, whether it is to a national or a supranational lab. We send those samples. Okay. So that has to, because there are lots of ethical issues, and there are lots of this of any sample, especially if you're saying going out of the country, so there's no issue. No. But even to give it to someone who wants to do it should not be an issue if it comes from up.
Right. Was it the government of India that just put out like a huge genomic database was made available in the public domain or something like that? That is the model worth emulating, I think. This was done by the government, and they collected all the...
TB also was that only. We shared all our... we gave all our... we sent... That's what I'm saying. We gave all our cultures. We packed it up, gave it all down to South Chennai, where they were in... one center was doing the entire bioinformatics.
Yes. They have a repository.
So, I mean to say, where private people are coming, it should not be an issue if that thing comes from up.
Absolutely. No, but I think ICMR does have this repository now, and they are providing all these samples, especially for the, even I think Molbio has accessed these samples for, testing their kits, newer generation. So I mean, it was an issue some time ago, but I think now that has been streamlined. And even as you said, all the genetic sequences are now up ready if you want to, really develop a new drug, mutation catalog, if you want to do drug targets, if you want to do a new test, everything is available. So I think that is very important. But I just want to respond to that social thing. So Meena, so maybe no specifically for TB, maybe it's not there, but I would really suggest that it's not that it's non-existent in India, because very recently, about 6 months ago, I went to Kerala to a peri-urban CHC in Trivandrum district, where actually the entire health center is not only the medical doctors, it's actually the block development officer, the education officer, the panchayat president, everybody is available. So we went for a visit. So basically, it's like the community is part of the healthcare system, and the community and the panchayat has given money to set up a rehabilitation center. So mostly it's for NCDs because that's their problem, because they have stroke, they have other things, but for TB. But I think, it's not that it's a very new concept. It's just that it takes time to build all these things, because it's, as you said, it's a human behavior change for us to say that, for a doctor to give up saying that, other people can also contribute for the well-being. So that's the issue. It's more of that rather than anything else. But I think we are getting there, but it needs more people, actually the community, to also push for these things, to ensure that these things happen. And I think the Panchayati Raj system is a very, very good example for pushing these things.
I think we want to close. I just want to say that the number of innovations that I saw upstairs was amazing, but many of them don't have adequate clinical validation done on their innovation. That is where all of you who are on the clinical side, on the lab side, you have to partner with them. Otherwise, it's going to remain a poster. Otherwise, it's going to remain like a prototype device that's simply not going anywhere. So please see it as your responsibility to the society to partner with innovators, like the amount of support that several groups provided to TrueNat, for example, MolBio. That is the reason why the company is also successful, right? Everybody felt that it was important to contribute. Patients are anyway contributing with their time and their samples. We also need to step up, because otherwise it'll just remain on a shelf, right? If it has to reach the patient in the end, we need high quality evidence, and then we need it to go through the ICMR pathway and CTD approval before it can be taken up. So thank you for your participation. Thank you, Ranjani.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madhukar and Dr. Ranjani. I would also request Dr. Ranjani to please hand over a memento to Dr. Madhukar as a token of appreciation.